Many decades, the U.S. government has dismissed out-of-hand UFO sightings as crank stuff, things that lunatics babble about. Now, suddenly, they're taking a different approach. They are telling the truth. They're finally admitting that UFO sightings are, in fact, routine, and the government is now being systematic in investigating the question of UFOs. A new History Channel documentary called Unidentified will explore the military's many recent encounters with unidentified aircraft.
The object the Navy pilot is tracking suddenly seems to get bigger. The object then appears to accelerate rapidly, disappearing off screen.
That's a significant rate of acceleration in a horizontal plane off to the left. That's very fast.
The object appears to perform a similar maneuver to what the pilots witnessed. Instantaneous acceleration at this rate would produce a force of gravity, or G-force, so extreme it would crush a human being.
Intelligence official and special agent in charge. He joins us tonight. Luis, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker, for having me.
So the military's decided to stop lying about this. I guess the first question is, why did they lie for so many years about what they knew?
I think that's a fair question, Tucker. I think there could be multiple answers. I think, first and foremost, let's look at the obvious. We didn't have quite the technology for decades that we do now. We now have the technology on some of the most sophisticated weapon systems that give us the fidelity that we need to better ascertain what these things are. Another answer could possibly be, frankly, stigma and taboo, and that this is a topic that is fraught with these landmines, potential, if you will, proverbial landmines.
Yeah, I mean, we sent a man to the moon 50 years ago, so we've had technology for a while, and in fact, it's been more than 60 years since right after the Second World War that the U.S. military has been downplaying these reports. So over the course of that time, some of the smartest, most dedicated people in our country watching these unexplained aerial phenomena, they must have gathered quite a bit of information about UFOs. What have they learned, do you think, in all these decades?
Well, Tucker, I can only answer from the time that I was with ATIP for about 10 years when I was part of that program. And we learned a lot. I think probably the most significant, if you will, results of the program were 5 observables. And you've already mentioned a few of them on your show, and that's instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities, a bit of an oxymoron, but low observability, transmedium travel, and last but not least, positive lift, or in the vernacular, anti-gravity.
So, I mean, there have been enough sightings over a long enough period that the idea that this is a computer glitch or that these are generated somehow by radar systems, that can't be right, correct?
Tucker, we are well beyond right now establishing whether or not these things exist. It is an absolute fact that they are there. Now, what they are, where they're from, who's behind the wheel, we simply don't know. I mean, is it possible these things are a foreign adversarial technology that somehow was developed in secret and we're just now trying to figure these things out? It's possible, but there's also other possibilities as well of what these things could be.
Right. So that would be the terrestrial explanation. Just assign off the top of your head a likelihood of that being the case, that these are Russian or Chinese.
Boy. Tucker, you don't want me to give my opinion. The one thing I learned in intelligence, there's a lot. You can be absolutely sure of something and be absolutely wrong.
Of course, so it's happened to me many times. But it sounds. I guess just to sort of put a bow on it.
I think it's a low probability. I think
that's it. Okay,
it's a very low probability. Look, we have the most sophisticated weapon systems right now on the face of the planet, and we can identify not only a 737 or a MiG-25 or a F-22. We can tell you even what airline it is and the difference between the models of aircraft within that type of aircraft. So I think it's highly unlikely that a foreign adversary was successful in developing something like this.
So let me ask you one last question. Do you believe, based on your decade of serving in the U.S. government on this question, that the U.S. government has in its possession any material from one of these aircrafts?
I do, yes.
Do you think the U.S. government has debris from a UFO in its possession right now?
Unfortunately, Tucker, I really have to be careful of my NDA. I really can't go into a lot of more detail than that.
Okay.
But simply put, yes.
All right. Well, we have a lot more to find out, and I'm very glad that you came on our show tonight. I hope
Thank you
for
having me.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
with strange objects in the sky. Those experiences are unpacked at some length in an upcoming History Channel A&E special called Unidentified.
Many of these pilots have hundreds, if not several thousands flying hours. It's not in their interest to make this stuff up because professionally it could be very damaging to them.
Really no distinct wings, no distinct tail, no distinct exhaust plume. It seemed like they were aware of our presence because they would actively move around us.
There are a lot of people like that. According to a recent New York Times piece, in 2014 and parts of 2015, UFOs were being spotted almost daily by the U.S. military. Almost daily. It's hard to process that information. Were you surprised to learn that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little surprised that it's sort of coming out now, but yeah, I mean, I think it kind of speaks to a broader phenomenon that this is not as sort of like a fringe pursuit as it used to be. People aren't as embarrassed as it used to be to kind of entertain the actual possibility that we're not alone, and I mean, I think that's probably a positive development.
Well, it kind of came out of nowhere. When we 2 years ago started doing shows on this subject, because I thought, I don't know, it sounded like maybe it's real, people dismissed it as crazy just 2 years ago. But if this has been sightings almost every day, why are we just finding out about it now?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is sort of this groundswell, kind of like you're talking about. I mean, part of it is in the scientific community. This is not viewed as so fringe anymore. I mean, we have learned recently over the past decade that there are probably about 50 billion habitable planets just in our galaxy alone, and we have found other worlds in our solar system that actually might be habitable. So yeah, it's just sort of creeping across the entire public consciousness that this is not like a crazy thing to actually think about.
Well, I haven't thought enough about it because I live in D.C. and all we talk about is Russia, but should we be concerned? Are you concerned? Do you think about this a lot?
No, I mean, I'm not concerned. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I would say I'm kind of skeptical, but I don't dismiss these just out of hand. That's not very scientific. I mean, I would think, I mean, I would think if there are alien spacecraft, I would wonder why they kind of got here on their own without being detected, like across vast gulfs of space, but then zipped around for a little while and then zoomed off. I mean, it just kind of would be weird to kind of think about what are they doing? Why did they allow themselves to be detected? What's the point? I mean, all those things kind of factor in, but then you're getting into like ET psychology, and that's a very dangerous thing to kind of wade into because we have no idea what we're even talking about.
Yeah, no, we don't. But that kind of is the point. We don't know, and we can say that conclusively. There's an extensive phenomenon we don't understand, correct?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's really important to actually keep an open mind and say,
yes.
I mean, it's probably instrumentation. Maybe it's like a software issue. Maybe people don't fully know what they're looking at on these infrared images of these weird objects from these fighter jet cameras. But that doesn't mean that we should totally just say there is like no way that it could be something we don't understand.
And we won't, because we have an open mind on this show above all. Doctor, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Yeah.
We're out of time. States, even the U.S. Navy isn't certain what is going on. The Navy did just confirm that it is drafting new guidelines for personnel to report encounters with, quote, unidentified aircraft. The goal is to destigmatize the sightings of advanced, very high-speed aircraft that have been seen quite frequently approaching Navy ships and facilities without explanation. The Navy issued a statement that said, in part, this, quote, there have been a number of reports of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft entering various military control ranges and designated airspace in recent years. For safety and security concerns, the Navy and the U.S. Air Force take these reports very seriously and investigate each and every report. As part of this effort, the Navy is updating and formalizing the process by which reports of any such suspected incursions can be made to the cognizant authorities, unquote. Chris Mellon is a former Pentagon intelligence official. He's closely involved in the History Channel's upcoming 6-part series, Unidentified, Inside America's UFO Investigation. He joins us tonight. Chris, thanks very much for coming on. So we've gone in a pretty short period of time from the U.S. military not really acknowledging that there is such a thing to them acknowledging that these sightings are so frequent they need a formal process for reporting them. What's changed?
Yes, thank you, Tucker. It's an extraordinary turnaround, and it's really the result of an interaction between Congress and the Navy. And the fact that this has gotten on Congress's radar began some discussions which elevated an issue that before this time had been smothered and kept at low levels of the bureaucracy. So now you have more senior policymaking officials hearing in some cases firsthand from the aviators involved and other personnel. They're learning the reality of the issue, and they're asking some direct and sometimes tough questions. And so this has elevated this entire issue within the department, and kudos to both for engaging and really listening to our men and women in uniform who've been squelched in the past, who've really been treated with disdain sometimes for reporting what's happening.
Well, I mean, and pilots, of course, are trained to discern between aircraft and weather balloons. So, like, if there's one group you should listen to, it's pilots. How often are these sightings reported? Do we know?
We don't know. We believe that probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, they are not reported when there's an encounter. We know from numerous debriefings and interviews that individuals in squadrons, when they bring a story forward, they're the only individual in their squadron usually who's willing to do so or have that discussion. We see the same thing among commercial airline pilots. It's not career enhancing, to say the least. We know these individuals are often ridiculed, and were in the past, which is partly why this is such an important development. They're saying it's a legitimate issue now. You can talk about it.
So, but what do they think? I mean, I was just reading this morning, some of these sightings, again, by military pilots who know the difference, estimate that these are objects moving at 15,000 miles per hour, for example. I mean, that's so much faster than any object, human-made object, has ever traveled that we're aware of. So what do they think that is? What's the going theory on this?
Yeah, this is tough terrain. There are 3 hypotheses that people have put forward, and none of them are very comfortable. One is that one of our adversaries has leapfrogged us technologically, China or Russia. Putin has been making some extraordinary claims about Russian technology. Another theory is that these are some test aircraft of the U.S. I think we can discard that now with the Navy itself acknowledging these are not American. And the third popular theory, of course, is that these may be from some civilization elsewhere beyond our solar system. And none of these theories are very comfortable to contemplate, but we have to look at facts and derive theories from facts, not start with theories and disrule or rule out facts.
I mean, I hope this will get us a lot closer to doing this. Just very quickly, are the results of these surveys going to be made public at any point?
To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, my colleagues and I, we have drafted some proposed legislation for Congress to consider. It would simply ask for a report on this. It wouldn't cost any money. Right now,
let's demand one, shall we?
One of the problems is,
really quick.
One of the problems is nobody's in charge, and these organizations don't share information, so the information isn't pooled or analyzed.
Right. Well, that's the story of government. Chris, thanks so much for everything you do. Great to see you. Back 8 p.m. So there's something going on in the skies above us. Even the government isn't certain exactly what it is. Recently, declassified documents show that U.S. government has for years maintained a program that investigated the health effects of UFO encounters on those who saw them. Meanwhile, in response to the news that it's crafting a new UFO reporting system, the Navy, the U.S. Navy, has openly admitted to repeated. He was totally right, and he joins us tonight. We're glad to have him. So, Nick, first to the news that the U.S. government has investigated the health effects of contact with UFOs. What does that mean?
Well, this is a part of the Pentagon's ATIP program that studied these unexplained phenomena. And it's a part that we haven't heard much about. Everyone's been concentrating on the videos of the Navy jets chasing the UFOs. But if you go back to Harry Reid's letter to the Department of Defense, he describes this in terms of the human interface and human effects aspect of the program. And then more recently, when the DIA wrote to Congress about this, in amongst all the papers on exotic propulsion systems that they produced was a paper entitled Field Effects on Biological Tissues. And it seems as if what they were interested in is the effects of all this on the people that witnessed it. And I understand that this involved, for example, things like blood samples, DNA tests, and other medical tests and procedures.
So, I mean, what this really tells us is that UFO encounters are so common that they worried about the health effects of those encounters on Americans. So there's really no question that the U.S. government has known for a long time that something profound is going on. I'm not saying they know what it is, but they've lied about that. Why have they lied about that for so long? It's bewildering.
Well, I think there are very difficult defence and national security issues here. And there is also this blurring of the lines. We don't know, we really don't, whether with some of these things we're talking about Russians, Chinese, right, or something from, shall we say, farther afield than that. And so there's embarrassment. The other point is you can't say we've lost control of our own airspace. But I did a cold case review on a case in the UK where it turned out some military witnesses were probably exposed to UAP radiation. Now, UAP is the British government term for UFO, unidentified aerial phenomena, and these people are now trying to get medical settlements for health issues that they attribute to these close encounters.
It's almost like there's a whole kind of parallel worlds going on where these stories are addressed, but the rest of us are not even aware of it. And we sort of know that there are these UFO nuts, but it turns out lots of sober, well-educated people have been devoting an awful lot of time to studying this stuff for decades. And I'm just amazed that we didn't know.
Well, the Ministry of Defence was studying it, the Department of Defence here and the Defence Intelligence Agency. And, of course, as you said in your introduction, just last week the Navy have announced a new policy on this to encourage their pilots and their radar operators to come forward and speak out, to destigmatise it. I support that. It's unfortunate that we're not going to get, apparently, the data that's actually produced under this. I hope we can get unclassified summaries, and I certainly hope we can get, for example, a copy of the guidance that they say they've just issued on this, because that will give us some clues as to what's going on here.
Why the hell isn't the Today Show leading with this every morning for the next 10 years? Is there a more interesting story? I don't think there is. Nick Pope, I know you agree with that. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely I do. And look, you know, if the Navy want to diffuse all this UFO hysteria...